What is the general reaction in the United States?
Well, among Democrats, there's a sense of relief. There's a sense of rejuvenation. Among Republicans, there's a sense of told you so, that he was not fit for the job. And among those very few that are still uncommitted, well, there's a brand new race for them to evaluate.
Now, much was made by Donald Trump of Joe Biden's infirmity, but Trump himself has inherited the mantle of the oldest presidential candidate ever now that Joe Biden's not in the field. How do you think that is going to play?
I think that's going to play. Well, no matter who, I don't want to say no matter who, but almost everyone who possibly could be a candidate. Now, again, Kamala Harris is by far the favorite at this point, but almost any other candidate, if there was an open process, would be significantly younger than Donald Trump. So that definitely will come into play. And as you said, he is now the oldest candidate. And if he was to be elected, he would be the oldest president ever if he finished out his term.
Now, on this side of the Atlantic, we don't hear that much about Kamala Harris. No doubt we'll hear more in the coming weeks. But being on the other side of the Atlantic, you probably see much more of her being covered on the networks. How has she been performing?
Well, there are some concerns among the Democrats that she has not been performing well. Now, over the past 3 years of the administration, she has somewhat taken a back seat. The one area where she has stood out and which could be a big plus for the Democrats is on women's rights and on reproductive rights, in which she's had a strong and loud and consistent voice. That is something that Democrats hope will resonate with women, especially women of color, who might be, we're feeling a little bit uncertain about supporting Joe Biden again for a second term.
Now, we've had in the past few years a number of firsts. We had Hillary Clinton running for the highest office in the land, and although she didn't make it, defeated by Donald Trump in the Electoral College, she did win the popular vote, which would suggest that were the popular vote to be the decider, that America is ready for a woman president. And of course, we had the first black president in Barack Obama. Now we have the possibility of a woman of colour, if you like, ticking 2 boxes in going before the electorate.
Well, you could tick 3 boxes. She's also a woman of South Asian descent, so that would be the first if she became president. But there are concerns that parts of the country are not ready for that. They're not ready for a woman. They're not ready, especially for a black woman. So that is a concern. Democrats, if they do choose Kamala Harris, are going to push ahead with that anyway, and that becomes part of her story. But again, there are some Republicans who are adamantly against her and have been against her pretty much for the past 4 years since she was first announced as Joe Biden's running mate in 2016.
What do you make, Terry, of the calls by some Republicans that this transition, if you like, from Biden to Harris should be repudiated because, after all, they did have primaries and Joe Biden was the selected candidate?
Well, I mean, Joe Biden, no one forced Joe Biden to drop out yesterday. Yes, you could say he was under heavy pressure, but no one forced him to drop out. The delegates are free to vote any way they want to vote at the convention or in the days leading up, actually. So it's a case of if the delegates are still voting, they're the ones that ultimately are going to make the decision. That is a line of Republican attack. I don't think it's going to stick.
Now, Donald Trump has already derided Kamala Harris in public. He's mocked her in the same way as he mocked members of his own party who went against him, be it Nikki Haley or little Marco Rubio or any of them. He picks a nickname, and he's had a go at Kamala Harris. Do you think that is a productive way for Donald Trump to campaign, having a go at the fact that he's nuts is what he said about her, and the fact that she's a woman?
Well, here's the problem for Donald Trump, or the issue for Donald Trump. As we have seen all through these years, he has problems with women who challenge him, and they tend to get under his skin. I mean, lately we saw last winter we saw with Nikki Haley. So Kamala Harris is someone that's going to get under Donald Trump's skin. If that happens, that will throw him off message and it causes him to say things that he wouldn't want to say. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah, he's going to go after her. He's going to belittle her, but she's also going to get under his skin.
Hmm. Do you think Kamala Harris will play by the rules and, not do the dirty tricks routine? Because in a situation where you can say 25% of all women have been the subject of some sort of sexual attack, and, she will be debating opposite a man who is convicted in a civil court of sexual assault. Is she likely to bring those kind of things up? Has she got the, if you like, the mettle to do that?
I think she could if she chooses to. I think what she's also going to point to is the fact that she's a former prosecutor and she will be across the stage with a convicted felon. I think that's the dynamic that she's going to bring. And also, as you talked about, the toughness and the mettle, that, hey, I'm a prosecutor. I can deal with people like Donald Trump. I've been tough. I've put people in jail. I put people like Donald Trump in jail. So I think that's something that she's going to hit on harder.
Listening to all of that is Larry Donnelly, law lecturer at the University of Galway, columnist with the Journal.ie. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning, Pat.
Well, he finally did it, didn't he?
Yeah, look, I think he took too long to do it. I think that's indicative of how desperately he wanted to continue with this. But I think the mountain of polling data, which I think was very, very negative, including one poll showing him 7 points behind in the state of Michigan, I think that was very, very damning, as well as the donors' reticence to continue funding not only him, but candidates up and down the ballot. And the prospect that this would be a devastating day for the Democratic Party and a real stain on his legacy. I think that's what moved him in the end.
Because if he had lost and handed the presidency to Donald Trump, he would have been certainly blamed, and that would have been possibly the only thing of his legacy that would be remembered.
Yes, and I think, Pat, at this stage, it's too late. I mean, if Trump is elected, I think Biden still will be blamed by an awful lot of people. But I also think the Democratic National Committee shares a tremendous amount of that blame because this is a mess in many ways of its own creation. The chat, the conversations, the move to prevent Biden from seeking a second term should have begun some time ago because anyone with eyes and ears knew that he was declining, knew that a disastrous debate performance could well happen, yet they acquiesced to the demands of the Biden team, which was a terrible, terrible mistake.
That question of who knew, we're hearing now that, people who met him, one person, I've forgotten who it was, who met him, I think in Normandy, said, I knew him well. He was a great friend of mine for all my life. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know who I was. So, a closely guarded secret, almost like in the old days of the Soviet Union, where a leader might be dead for weeks before it would be announced to the world.
Yeah, that's what it called to mind, really, and it's a very sorry saga. I mean, you can understand from one point of view how Biden desperately wanted to continue. This is a guy who, has made a living out of overcoming adversity and doing things people told him he could not do, and he's overcome a lot of things. In fairness to him, he has an otherwise very solid, strong career in public service. And when he finally got to the top of the mountain, he wasn't going to give that up easily. Yet, politics is a very tough business, Pat, as everyone knows. And the reality is that when you're going up against Donald Trump and when the stakes are as high as the Democrats think they are, that is, democracy is on the line, Trump could be, do all sorts of things in his second term. You do not send somebody who's vulnerable up against him. And that's why I cannot fathom why, rather than trying to steer him in a different direction, the Democratic National Committee actually paved the way for him to have easy access to a second term. And now they're in this mess, and it's a mess entirely of their own making. The race has changed. Now that it's likely that Kamala Harris will be the nominee, the race has changed, but still, it is very much advantaged Donald Trump.